Hey y'all, I'm Katie and I am from Florida. And before I get started on my presentation, I just wanted to say that it has been such a pleasure to communicate and study with each of you this semester, to comment on your discussion posts, to have you comment on mine, to learn from each of you. It's just been such a pleasure. So 9 to 10 minutes is not very long, so I'm going to dive right in. My theory that I chose was the cultivation theory, and from the minute that I read about the cultivation theory, I was completely captivated by it. It just seemed kind of like a no-brainer to me, and I just was so intrigued by what the theory actually states. So just a little background, the cultivation theory was created in 1976 by two professors, George Gubner and Larry Gross. And the main idea of this theory is that it focuses on the long-term impacts that television has on American audiences. And the cultivation theory basically says that certain TV shows can have a great impact on the way that audiences view the world and society around them. And so, as you can imagine, when I first read about the theory, I was just very interested to kind of study more about it and to learn more about George Gerbner and just kind of his reasons for even creating the theory. So, Gerbner argues that the cultivation theory is a theory that states that our constant view of television changes how we view the world. It doesn't necessarily dictate our behavior, but it does dictate our views. And so that's just an interesting concept to me. There are several key components when you're talking about the cultivation theory, but there's only two that I really want to introduce to you. And the first one being mainstreaming. And mainstreaming is a key component and is kind of an integral part of cultivation. It's basically the idea that someone with fluctuating opinions slowly changes to match their views with the reality that they're exposed to on television. And so, with this idea, there are two different types of viewers: there are heavy viewers and there are light viewers. And so, our heavy viewers are those who view at least 4 hours of television a day, and so 4 or more hours. And then, obviously, our light viewers are those who view less than 4 hours of television a day. Another key component, one that I think that we can all kind of relate to, is resonance. And resonance in terms of the cultivation theory happens when what the television viewer is watching on television also happens in their reality. And so I'm sure that we have all watched TV, we have all watched a movie, and we've been able to resonate with something that happened on the big screen. And so resonance plays also a huge part in the cultivation theory. With every theory, you have strengths and weaknesses, and the cultivation theory is no different. There are several strengths that are represented in this theory, and I think the biggest one being that almost the entire world is exposed to television. And so televisions are very easy to operate, and almost everybody has them in their homes. If you're like me, you have 5 or 6 in your home. I have 3 just in one room because I love to watch football. And so we all almost have access to TV. The theory is also easily researched because of the extensive range of shows and stations that are available. And so it makes it easy to back the theory because there's so much research that can be conducted because of all of the outlets for television. I also look at the mean world syndrome as a strength for this theory. And the mean world syndrome is basically a syndrome that says that people view the world as dark and dangerous. And I know that sounds kind of negative, but I think it's a strength for the theory because it has the ability to isolate people, and that isolation becomes a strength in favor of the theory because it influences the viewer to agree with the content being displayed on the television show being watched at the time. And so it isolates the viewer and then it influences them. And I think that's a strength for the theory because of all that the theory states. Now, with every theory, there are strengths, but there are also weaknesses, and this theory is no different. This theory, it can't be measured by scientific standards, so there's actually no scientific proof for the theory. And so that can kind of, be a weakness for it if you're looking for someone who needs evidence, who needs scientific proof. There are those people out there for sure. Gerbner claims that the cultivation theory has long-term effects, when in reality the theory was actually only able to measure short-term effects, and it only measured, American audiences, and so it didn't really, that's a very small portion of the entire world, so it only looked at just a small portion. Another significant weakness that I identified regarding this theory is that it doesn't actually give individuals an option of whether or not to be affected by the violence. It just says that they are. It says that they're affected by what they see on TV. Primarily, the theory talks about violence. You'll probably hear me talk about violence in a few minutes. But it says that you're impacted no matter what. And I have to believe there's probably someone out there who could watch TV and not be impacted by it. So I think that can be just as big of a weakness as anything. There has been so much research done on this theory, and our book, Little John, he says that over 500 studies have been piloted since the beginning of the theory. And I would love to dive into some of that with you, but like I said, 9 to 10 minutes is not a long time. And so I have my paper and I would love to send it to you guys if anybody is interested in reading it and just reading about some of the research. It's hard for me to really dive into it because it just leads to more questions and proposes so many more ideas, and so I don't even want to present that to you when I can't truly take the time to explain it. But like I said, I'll be happy to send you my paper so that you can read about some of that research, or I just encourage you to look it up like I did. The theory is very interesting. But over 500 studies, and I've read just countless amounts of them, probably 40 or 50, to try to incorporate some of that into my own research. And so moving along, I want to talk about the cultivation theory in the 21st century. I think the cultivation theory is still incredibly relevant. I think that people are impacted by TV, but I think they're not only impacted by TV. I think there are so many outlets out there for shows and for movies and for media outlets. It's not just TV, it's the internet, it's social media, it's apps, it's everything, and it's constantly revolving, it's constantly changing. And I think if the theory is to remain relevant, we have to take a look at the changes that have happened since 1976. I think if it was looked at in today's current atmosphere, it is clear that the internet would play probably the most integral part of the theory. The internet is consistently captivating audiences, not only in America, but all over the world. And so this concept of the cultivation theory would only grow in truth because of the realm that the internet brings to it. So I think it's important to look at that. I proposed in my research just kind of my own personal analysis, and I don't have time to go over all my stories that I had put in there, but I would love for you to read about them. So if you want, like I said, a copy of the paper, I'll be happy to send it to you. One specific example that I noticed in recognizing that people can be impacted by TV actually happened in my school. As you guys know, I'm an educator. I work in the education field. And so I'm actually in my office right now recording this video. And we had a couple students last year who we're going through some hard times and we're being completely influenced by a TV show. And it wasn't until we really started to dig deep into what was going on in their life that we realized the show is what was impacting their decisions. And we had a couple girls who wanted to commit suicide, and turns out it all stemmed from the show 13 Reasons Why, which is a Netflix original. If you haven't seen it, I'm sure you've heard about it. There was so much controversy revolving around it. And I didn't really know how to engage in conversation with these students because I didn't know what it was that they were watching. And so I made it a point to get on Netflix. I watched the entire season and I was dumbfounded. I was disheartened. I can't even explain to you all of how I felt. The show basically glorifies suicide, and these girls looked at it as a cool thing to do. And so when I think about this theory, I think about those girls because I saw them impacted by TV. And so I think, this theory I've seen in my own life, it does have relevance. I've seen people impacted, and I can see my own self walking down the street and being more cautious of the people that are around me, being more cautious of my surroundings, being in the car and seeing if anybody's following me. I know that sounds crazy, but I think, all the crime TV that we watch, all the violent TV that's out there, it does have the ability to change the way that we see the world, the way that we view the world. And so I'm already at 9 minutes and I've barely even scratched the surface of the theory, but I hope that I've shed a little bit of light on this theory for you. And I hope that you will continue on and go and do some research of yourself, do some digging, and just know that the cultivation theory is just full of interesting key points. And I think the future of the cultivation theory is only going to grow and is only going to continue to impact people because it's not just television anymore. It's internet, it's social media, it's apps, it's everything that I talked about before. But that's all the time that I have. I look forward to your comments. I look forward to seeing each of your posts. And I just know that I'm praying for each of you as this semester closes out. Take care. God bless.